And we are live on YouTube. Slow this down a little bit. Okay. Probably. All right, beautiful people. Happy Wednesday. All right. It is March the 17th, 2021. Day 104 of year 3 of reading through the books of the law and the prophets and of the 3-year consecutive day count. Day 773. Yes, those are like the Sabbath days and the feast day Sabbath days added into the count. Judges chapter 19, 20, and 21 is what we are reading today. Fix the version. Okay. Hi, beautiful people. Okay. Grand Rising, Auntie. All right. That's Wabu, Alicia, Katrina. That's Wabu. All right, y'all. Let's stop with the Shema. Hear, therefore, O Israel, and observe to do it, that it may be well with you, and that you may increase mightily as Yahuwah, the God of our fathers, has promised us in the land that flows with milk and honey. Hear, O Israel, Yahuwah, our God, He is one God. And you shall love Yahuwah your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. And these words which I command you this day shall be in your heart, and you shall teach them diligently unto your children. And you shall talk of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise up. And you shall bind them for a sign upon your hand. And they shall be as frontlets between your eyes. And you shall write them upon the posts of your house and on your gates. And Yahuwah commanded us to do all these statutes, to fear Yahuwah our God for our good always, that He might preserve us alive as it is at this day. And it shall be our righteousness if we observe to do all these commandments before Yahuwah our God, as He has commanded us. All right, beautiful people. Let's go ahead and get started right here in Judges chapter 19. Okay, so remember, we're going through the cycle where Israel had no king, right? So they just doing everything that was right in their own sight, right? Okay, so they had their first king, which was Moses. Then it transitioned to Joshua and so on, right? And then when Israel didn't have a king, Yahuwah was sending the prophets, right? And prophets were always there, right? But then He began to send the judges to rule. Every time Israel got in trouble, they cried out, and Yahuwah sends a savior or a Messiah or a deliverer. Now, in those days, Israel had no king. There was a man from the tribe of Levi living in a remote area in the hill country of Ephraim. One day he brought home a woman from Bethlehem in Judea to be his concubine, but she became angry with him and returned to her father's home in Bethlehem. After about 4 months, her husband set out for Bethlehem to speak personally to her and to persuade her to come back. He took with him a servant and a pair of donkeys. When he arrived at her father's house, her father saw him and welcomed him. Her father urged him to stay a while, so he stayed 3 days, eating, drinking, and sleeping there. On the fourth day, the man was up early, ready to leave, but the father's woman said to his son-in-law, have, have something to eat before you go. So the two men sat down together and had something to eat and drink. Then the woman's father said, please stay for another night and enjoy yourself. The man got up to leave, but his father-in-law kept urging him to stay. So he finally gave in and stayed the night. On the morning of the fifth day, he was up early again, ready to leave, and again the woman's father said, have something to eat. Then you can leave later this afternoon. So they had another day of feasting. Later, as the man and his concubine and the servant were preparing to leave, the father-in-law said, look, it's almost evening. Stay tonight and enjoy yourself. Tomorrow you can get up early and be on your way. But this time the man was determined to leave. So he took his two saddled donkeys and his concubine and headed in the direction of Jebus, that is Jerusalem. It was late in the day when they neared Jebus, and the man's servant said to him, let's stop at this Jebusite town and spend the night there. No, his master said, we cannot stay in this foreign town where there are no Israelites. Instead, we'll go on to Gibeah. Come on, let's try and get as far as Gibeah or Ramah, and we'll spend the night in one of those towns. So they went on. The sun was setting as they came to Gibeah, a town in the land of Benjamin. So they stopped there to spend the night and rested in the town square, but no one took them in for the night. That evening, an old man came home from his work in the fields. He was from the hill country of Ephraim, but he was living in Gibeah, where the people were from the tribe of Benjamin. When he saw the travelers sitting in the town square, he asked them where they were from and where they were going. We have been in Bethlehem in Judea, the man replied. We are on our way to a remote area in the hill country of Ephraim, which is my home. I traveled to Bethlehem, and now I'm returning home. But no one has taken us in for the night, even though we have everything we need. We have straw and feed for our donkeys and plenty of bread and wine for ourselves. You are welcome to stay with me, the old man said. I will give you anything you might need, but whatever you do, don't spend the night in the square. So he took them home and fed the donkeys. After they washed their feet, they ate and drank together. While they were enjoying themselves, a crowd of troublemakers from the town surrounded the house. They began beating at the door and shouting to the old man, bring out the man who is staying with you so we can have sex with him. I'm like, wait a minute. He sure he mistaken this town for Sodom and Gomorrah. While they were enjoying themselves, a crowd of troublemakers from the town surrounded the house. They began beating at the door and shouting to the old man, bring out the man who is staying with you so we can have sex with him. The old man stepped outside to talk to them. No, my brothers, don't do such an evil thing, for this man is a guest in my house, and such a thing would be shameful. Here, take my virgin daughter and this man's concubine. Like, first of all, how you offering up my wife, right? Like, because I know it's a concubine, but it mentioned earlier that the father said his son-in-law, his wife's husband. Yeah, he said his son-in-law. So clearly, all right. But still, first of all, you offering up your virgin daughter. Like, that is not yours to give away. She your daughter, but you cannot, not in that sense, right? You're not to prostitute your daughters, right? That would be a shameful thing. Let alone somebody else's wife. And where did this man, what was this man at when he was offering up his wife? Like, let me keep reading. Shalom, Mom, shalom. The old man stepped outside to talk to them. No, my brothers, don't do such an evil thing, for this man is a guest in my house, and such a thing would be shameful. Here, take my virgin daughter and this man's concubine. I will bring them out to you, and you can abuse them and do whatever you like. But don't do such a shameful thing to this man. But they wouldn't listen to him. So the Levite took hold of his concubine and pushed her out the door. The men, oh my gosh, the men of we would have been in there fighting. I'm going to keep reading. But they wouldn't listen to him. So the Levite took hold of his concubine and pushed her out the door. The men of the town abused her all night, taking turns raping her until morning. Finally, at dawn, they let her go. At daybreak, the woman returned to the house where her husband was staying. She collapsed at the door of the house and lay there until it was light. When her husband opened the door to leave, there lay his concubine with her hands on the threshold. He said, "Get up, let's go." Like, I would have been like, "You bastard. You didn't even open the door and come after me." Look, I'm sorry, y'all. Every time I read this, I get heated. When her husband opened the door to leave, there lay his concubine with her hands on the threshold. He said, "Get up, let's go." But there was no answer. So he put her body on his donkey and took her home. When he got home, he took a knife and cut his concubine's body into 12 pieces. Then he sent one piece to each tribe throughout the territory of Israel. Everyone who saw it said, "Such a horrible crime has not been committed in all the time since Israel left Egypt." Think about it. What are we going to do? Who is going to speak up? Judges chapter 20. Then all the Israelites were united one man, from Dan in the north to Beersheba in the south, including those across the Jordan and the land of Gilead. The entire community assembled in the presence of Yahuwah at Mizpah, the leaders of all the people and all the tribes of Israel, 400,000 warriors armed with swords, took their positions in the assembly of the people of Yahuwah. Word soon reached the land of Benjamin that the other tribes had gone up to Mizpah. The Israelites then asked how this terrible crime had happened. The Levite, the husband of the woman who had been murdered, said husband, although he was calling her his concubine. It was clearly his wife. The Levite, the husband of the woman who had been murdered, said, "My concubine and I came to spend the night in Gibeah, a town that belongs to the people of Benjamin." That night, some of the leading citizens of Gibeah surrounded the house, planning to kill me, and they raped my concubine until she was dead. So I cut her body into 12 pieces and sent the pieces throughout the territory assigned to Israel. For these men have committed a terrible and shameful crime. Now then, all of you, the entire community of Israel, must decide here and now what should be done about this. First of all, let's address why you didn't go after your wife, right? Like, you stayed in there to save your own butt, literally. And then, like, you just travel all this way because she got pissed with you and left. Traveled cities to go back home to her father's house. You wanted her back. You wanted your wife with you. So you traveled through all these towns to go get your wife, right? And then you let this happen after you spend all this time begging and pleading for her to come back. Hey, let's make this thing right. Then you let this happen to her. She was better off staying with her father. Boy. Look. Let me keep reading this. So I cut her body into 12 pieces and sent the pieces throughout the territory assigned to Israel, for the men have committed a terrible and shameful crime. Now then, all of you, the entire community of Israel, must decide here and now what should be done about this. And all the people rose to their feet in unison and declared, "None of us will return home. No, not even one of us. Instead, this is what we will do to Gibeah. We will draw lots to decide who will attack it. 1/10 of the men from each tribe will be chosen to supply the warriors with food, and the rest of us will take revenge on Gibeah of Benjamin for this shameful thing that they have done in Israel." So all the Israelites were completely united, and they gathered together to attack the town. The Israelites sent messengers to the tribe of Benjamin, saying, "What a terrible thing has been done among you. Give up those evil men, those troublemakers from Gibeah, so we can execute them and purge Israel of this evil." But the people of Benjamin would not listen. Instead, they came from their towns and gathered at Gibeah to fight the Israelites. In all, 26,000 of their warriors, armed with swords, arrived at Gibeah to join the 700 elite troops who lived there. Among Benjamin's elite troops, 700 were left-handed, and each of them could sling a rock and hit a target within a hair's breadth without missing. Israel had 400,000 experienced soldiers armed with swords, not counting Benjamin's warriors. Before the battle, the Israelites went to Bethel and asked Yahuwah which tribe should go first to attack the people of Benjamin. Yahuwah answered, Judah is to go first. So the Israelites left early the next morning and camped near Gibeah. Then they advanced toward Gibeah to attack the men of Benjamin. But Benjamin's warriors, who were defending the town, came out and killed 22,000 Israelites on the battlefield that day. But the Israelites encouraged each other and took their positions again at the same place they had fought the previous day. They had gone up to Bethel and wept in the presence of Yahuwah until evening. They asked Yahuwah, should we fight against our relatives from Benjamin again? And Yahuwah answered and said, go out and fight against them. So the next day, they went out to fight against the men of Benjamin, but the men of Benjamin killed another 18,000 Israelites, all of whom were experienced with the sword. Then all the Israelites went up to Bethel and wept in the presence of Yahuwah and fasted until evening. They also burnt offerings and peace offerings to Yahuwah. The Israelites went up seeking direction from Yahuwah. In those days, the Ark of the Covenant was in Bethel, and Phinehas, son of Eleazar, the grandson of Aaron, was the priest. The Israelites asked Yahuwah, should we fight against our relatives from Benjamin again, or should we stop? Yahuwah said, go. Tomorrow I will hand them over to you. So the Israelites set an ambush around Gibeah, and they went out on the third day and took their positions at the same place as before. When the men of Benjamin came out to attack, they were drawn away from the town, and as they had done before, they began to kill the Israelites. About 30 Israelites died in the open fields and along the roads, one leading to Bethel and the other leading back to Gibeah. Then the warriors of Benjamin shouted, we are defeating them as we did before. But the Israelites had planned in advance to run away so that the men of Benjamin would chase them along the road and be drawn away from the town. When the main group of Israelite warriors reached Baal Tamar, they turned and took up their positions. Meanwhile, the Israelites hiding in ambush to the west of Gibeah jumped up to fight. There were 10,000 elite Israelite troops who advanced against Gibeah. The fighting was so heavy that Benjamin didn't realize the impending disaster. So Yahuwah helped Israel defeat Benjamin. And that day, the Israelites killed 25,100 of Benjamin's warriors, all of who were experienced swordsmen. Then the men of Benjamin saw that they were beaten. The Israelites had retreated from Benjamin's warriors in order to give those hiding in ambush more room to maneuver against Gibeah. Then those who were hiding rushed in from all sides and killed everyone in the town. They had arranged to send up a large cloud of smoke from the town as a signal. When the Israelites saw the smoke, they turned and attacked Benjamin's warriors. By that time, Benjamin's warriors had killed about 30 Israelites, and they shouted, we are defeating them as we did in the first battle. But when the warriors of Benjamin looked behind them and saw the smoke rising into the sky from every part of the town, the men of Israel turned and attacked. At this point, the men of Benjamin became terrified because they realized disaster was close at hand. So they turned around and fled before the Israelites toward the wilderness, but they could not escape the battle, and the people who came out of the nearby towns were also killed. The Israelites surrounded the men of Benjamin and chased them relentlessly, finally overtaking them east of Gibeah. That day, 18,000 of Benjamin's strongest warriors died in battle. The survivors fled into the wilderness toward the rock of Rimmon, but Israel killed 5,000 of them along the road. They continued the chase until they had killed another 2,000 near Gittim. So that day, the tribe of Benjamin lost 25,000 strong warriors armed with swords, leaving only 600 men who escaped to the rock of Rimmon, where they lived for 4 months. And the Israelites returned and slaughtered every living thing in all the towns, the people, the livestock, and everything they found. They also burned down all the towns they came to. All right, y'all. Last chapter for the day, Judges chapter 21. The Israelites had vowed at Mizpah, "We will never give our daughters in marriage to a man from the tribe of Benjamin." Now the people went to Bethel and sat in the presence of Yahuwah until evening, weeping loudly and bitterly. "O Lord, God of Israel," they cried out, "why has this happened in Israel? Now one of our tribes is missing from Israel." Early the next morning, the people built an altar and presented their burnt offerings and peace offerings on it. Then they said, "Who among the tribes of Israel did not join us at Mizpah when we held our assembly in the presence of Yahuwah?" At that time, they had taken a solemn oath in Yahuwah's presence, vowing that anyone who refused to come would be put to death. The Israelites felt sorry for their brother Benjamin and said, "Today, one of the tribes of Israel has been cut off. How can we find wives for the few who remain, since we have sworn by Yahuwah not to give them our daughters in marriage?" So they asked, "Who among the tribes of Israel did not join us at Mizpah when we assembled in the presence of Yahuwah?" And they discovered that no one from Jabesh Gilead had attended the assembly, for after they counted all the people, no one from Jabesh Gilead was present. So the assembly sent 12,000 of their best warriors to Jabesh Gilead with the orders to kill everyone there, including women and children. "This is what you are to do," they said. "Completely destroy all the males and every woman who is not a virgin." Among the residents of Jabesh Gilead, they found 400 young virgins who had never slept with a man, and they brought them to the camp at Shiloh in the land of Canaan. The Israelite assembly sent a peace delegation to the remaining people of Benjamin who were living at the rock of Rimmon. Then the men of Benjamin returned to their homes, and the 400 women of Jabesh Gilead who had been spared were given to them as wives, but there were not enough women for all of them. The people felt sorry for Benjamin because Yahuwah had made this gap among the tribes of Israel. So the elders of the assembly asked, "How can we find wives for the few who remain, since the women of the tribe of Benjamin are dead? There must be heirs for the survivors, so that the entire tribe of Israel is not wiped out. But we cannot give them our own daughters in marriage, because we have sworn with a solemn oath that anyone who does will fall under Yahuwah's curse." Then they sought Then they thought of the annual festival of Yahuwah held in Shiloh, south of Lebanon and north of Bethel, along the east side of the road that goes from Bethel to Shechem. Then they told the men of Benjamin who still needed wives, "Go and hide in the vineyards. When you see the young women of Shiloh come out for their dances, rush out from the vineyards, and each of you can take home one of them. Hold on. And each of you can take one of them home to the land of Benjamin to be your wife. When the fathers and brothers come to us and protest, we will tell them, 'Please be sympathetic. Let them have your daughters.' But we didn't find wives for all of them when we destroyed Jabesh Gilead, and you are not guilty of breaking the vow, since you did not actually give your daughters to them in marriage." Oh, so y'all just gonna go kidnap them. Isn't kidnapping against Torah? Like, look, he said, "Look, we done ran out of options here." Okay. So they had this party down here at Shiloh. When the women come out doing their dancing, y'all be hiding in the bushes, right? And every man for himself. Y'all just grab y'all want to go. Like, he telling them to grab women like you grabbing balloons at a birthday party, my G. I'm just like, he said, "Look, and then you won't be guilty of this curse, right? They won't be giving their daughters because y'all gonna take them, right? So I'm just like, Father, look, let them have your daughters. But we did not find wives for all of them when we destroyed Jabesh Gilead. And you are not guilty of breaking the vow, since you did not actually give your daughters to them in marriage." So the men of Benjamin did as they were told. Each man caught one of the women as she danced in celebration and carried her off to be his wife. They returned to their own land, and they rebuilt their towns and lived in them. Then the people of Israel departed by tribes and families, and they returned to their own homes. In those days, Israel had no king, and all the people did whatever seemed right in their own eyes. Clearly, yes, they just snatching women, Trina. Look, they didn't have a king. They said right here, in those days, Israel had no king, and all the people did whatever seemed right in their own eyes. All right, y'all. Breaking all kinds of commands. Look. Shalom, precise. All right, let's go ahead and hop on over here to the Legends of the Jews and pick up where we left off at yesterday with David's piety and his sin. All right, y'all. So we're on page 416. We are in volume 4, and the subsection is David's piety and his sin. If you've been following along, you should remember the chapter. All right. Neither his great achievements in war nor his remarkable good fortune moved David from his pious ways, or in aught changed his mode of life. Even after he became king, he sat at the feet of his teachers. Hold on, did I read this part? I did. I'm sorry. I did. I wrote it down right. I started at the wrong page. I'm sorry. We read this section already. It's Absalom's rebellion on the next page, right? Okay. Absalom's rebellion. We read that yesterday. Of all the punishments, however, inflicted upon David, none was so severe as the rebellion of his own son. Absalom was of such gigantic proportions that a man who himself was of extraordinary size, Absalom was of such gigantic proportions that a man who was himself of extraordinary size, standing in the eye socket of his skull, sank down into his nose. What? Okay. I'll just read it again. Okay. Absalom was of such gigantic proportions that a man who was himself of extraordinary size, standing in the eye socket of his skull, sank down into his nose. As for his marvelous hair, the account of it in the Bible does not convey a notion of its abundance. Absalom had taken the vow of a Nazarite as his vow was for life, because the growth of his hair was particularly heavy. The law permitted him to clip it slightly every week. It was this small quantity that the weight amounted to 200 shekels. Absalom Let me check this out. So when your Nazarite vow is for life, it says that the law permitted him to clip it slightly every week. Okay. As his vow was for life, and because the growth of his hair was particularly heavy, the law permitted him to clip it slightly every week. It was of this small quantity that the weight amounted to 200 shekels. Absalom arranged for his audacious rebellion with great cunning. He secured a letter from his royal father, empowering him to select 2 elders for his suite in every town he visited. With this document, he traveled through the whole of Palestine. In each town he went to, the 2 most distinguished men. In each town, he went to the 2 most distinguished men and invited them to accompany him, at the same time showing them what his father had written and assuring them that they had been chosen by him because he had a particular affection for them. So he succeeded in gathering the presidents of 200 courts about him. This having been accomplished, he arranged a large banquet at which he seated one of his emissaries between every 2 of his guests for the purpose of winning them over to his cause. The plan did not succeed wholly, for though the elders of the town stood by Absalom, their hearts in hope for David's victory. The knowledge that a part of Absalom's following sided with him in secret, that though he was pursued by his son, his friends remained true to him, somewhat consoled David in his distress. He thought that in these circumstances, if the worst came to worst, Absalom would at least feel pity for him. At first, however, the despair of David knew no bounds. He was on the point of worshiping an idol when his friend Hushai the Archite approached him, saying, The people will wonder that such a king should serve idols. David replied, should a king such as I be killed by his own son? Mourning. It is better for me to serve idols than that Yahuwah should be responsible for my misfortune and his name be thus desecrated. Hushai reproached him, why did thou marry a captive? There is no wrong in that, replied David. It is permitted according to the law. Hereupon Hushai, but thou did disregard the connection between the passage permitting it and the one that follows almost immediately after it in the scriptures, dealing with the disobedient and rebellious son, the natural issue of such a marriage. But thou did disregard the connection between the passage permitting it and the one that follows almost immediately after it in the scriptures, dealing with the disobedient and rebellious son, the natural issue of such a marriage. Hushai was not the only faithful friend and adherent David had. Some came to his rescue unexpectedly, as for instance, Shobai, the son of Nahash, who is identical with the Ammonite king Huan, the enemy of David at first, and later his ally. Barzillai, another one of his friends in need, also surprised him by his loyalty. For on the whole, his moral attitude was not the highest conceivable. Absalom's end was beset with terrors. When he was caught in the branches of the oak tree, he was about to sever his hair with a sword stroke, but suddenly he saw hell yawning beneath him, and he preferred to hang in the tree instead of throwing himself into the abyss alive. Absalom's crime indeed was of a nature to deserve the supreme torture, for which reason he is one of the few Hebrews who will have no portion in the world to come. His abode is in hell, where he is charged with the control of 10 heathen nations in the second division. Whenever the avenging angels sit in judgment on nations, they desire to visit punishment on Absalom too, but each time a heavenly voice is heard to call out, do not chastise him, do not burn him. He is a Hebrew, the son of my servant David. Whereupon Absalom is set up upon his throne and is accorded the treatment due to a king. Everybody going to hell ain't getting this treatment. I just want to let y'all know. Look, hold up. Wait. Let me just read this over. Hold on. Absalom's end was beset with terrors. When he was caught in the branches of the oak tree, he was about to sever his hair with a sword stroke, but suddenly he saw hell yawning beneath him, and he preferred to hang in the tree to throwing himself into the abyss alive. Absalom's crime was indeed of a nature to deserve the supreme torture, for which reason he is one of the few Hebrews who have no portion in the world to come. His abode is in hell, where he is charged with the control of 10 heathen nations in the second division. Whenever the avenging angels sit in judgment on the nations, they desire to visit punishment on Absalom too, but each time a heavenly voice is heard to call out, do not chastise him, do not burn him. He is a Hebrew, the son of my servant David. Whereupon Absalom is set up upon his throne and is accorded the treatment due to a king. That the extreme penalties of hell were thus averted from him was on account of David's eightfold repetition of his son's name and his lament over him. Besides, David's intercession had the effect of reattaching Absalom's severed head to his body. Good morning, Kathy. After his death, Absalom was childless, for all his children, his 3 sons and his daughter, died before him as a punishment for his having set fire to a field of grain belonging to Joab. David's atonement. All these sufferings did not suffice to atone for David's sin. Yahuwah once said to him, "How much longer shall this sin be hidden in thy hand and remain untoned? On thy account, the priestly city of Nob was destroyed. On the account of Doeg the Edomite was cast out of the communion of the pious, and on thy account Saul and his 3 sons were slain. What dost thou desire now? That thy household should perish, or that thyself shouldest be delivered into the hands of thy enemies?" David chose the latter doom. It happened one day when he was hunting. Satan, in the guise of a deer, enticed him further and further into the very territory of the Philistines, where he was recognized by Ishbi the giant, the brother of Goliath, his adversary. Desirous of avenging his brother, he seized David and cast him into a winepress, where the king would have to suffer a torturous end if by a miracle the earth beneath him had not begun to sink and so saved him from instantaneous death. His plight, however, remained desperate, and it required a second miracle to rescue him. In that hour, Abishai, the cousin of David, was preparing for the event of the Sabbath, for the king's misfortune happened on Friday as the Sabbath was about to come in. When Abishai poured out water to wash himself, he suddenly caught sight of drops of blood in it. Then he was startled by a dove that came to him, plucking out her plumes and moaning and wailing. Abishai exclaimed, "The dove is a symbol of the people of Israel. It cannot be but that David, the king of Israel, is in distress." Not finding the king at home, he was confirmed in his fears, and he determined to go on a search for David on the swiftest animal at his command, the king's own saddle beast. But first, he had to obtain the permission of the sages to mount the animal ridden by the king, for the law forbids a subject to avail himself of things set aside for personal use of a king. Only the impending danger could justify the exception made in this case. Scarcely had Abishai mounted the king's animal when he found himself in the land of the Philistines, for the earth had contracted miraculously. He met Ophrah, the mother of the 4 giant sons. She was about to kill him, but he anticipated the blow and slew her. Remember, this was the woman, one of the daughters of Naomi, right? Which gave birth to Goliath and 3 of his giant brothers. It was her that just got murdered. Scarcely had Abishai mounted the king's animal when he found himself in the land of the Philistines, for the earth had contracted miraculously. So he was transported immediately once he got on the king's horse. These things was happening all the time for us people. Listen, and it's still happening in places. People just don't know about it. He met Ophrah, the mother of the 4 giant sons. She was about to kill him, but he anticipated the blow and slew her. Ishbi, seeing that he now had 2 opponents, stuck his lance into the ground and hurled David up in the air in the expectation that when he fell, he would be transfixed by the lance. At that moment, Abishai appeared, and by pronouncing the name of Yahuwah, he kept David suspended twixt heaven and earth, or suspended between heaven and earth. The giant came and pulled David up, tossed him up. He put his sword or his lance into the ground, got David, tossed him up in the air, hoping that when he came down, he would fall on that sword. Abishai appeared immediately, pronounced the ineffable name of Yahuwah, not Yahuwah, but he pronounced the ineffable name, the secret name of war, right? Which wreaks havoc all across the land for the sons and daughters of the Most Holy, right? He spoke, listen. At that moment, Abishai appeared, and by pronouncing the name of Yahuwah, he kept David suspended between heaven and earth. Abishai questioned David how such plight had overtaken him, and David told him of his of his conversation with Yahuwah and how he himself had chosen to fall into the hands of the enemy rather than permit the ruin of his house. David's like, okay, so what happened was, like, looking while he's suspended in the air. Abishai, David, how did this happen, man? David sitting in the middle of the air. Okay. This what happened, Abishai. Look, Abishai questioned David how such evil plight had overtaken him, and David told him of his conversation with Yahuwah and how he himself had chosen to fall in the hands of the enemy rather than permit the ruin of his house. Abishai replied, reverse thy prayer, plead for thyself and not for thy descendants. Let thy children still wax, and thou do not afflict thyself about thy destiny. See, look, this is what I'm talking about. They got a habit of selling their children up the river, right? Let the curse fall on our children and not us. Like, this is why we're here in the land of our captivity, right? Because all these words, they done sold us up the river. All us been sold up the river. But we knew it was coming, right? Everybody hard-headed. Reverse thy prayer and plead for thyself and not for thy descendants. Let thy children still wax, and do thou not afflict thyself, and do not afflict thyself about their destiny. The two men joined their prayers and pleaded with Yahuwah to avert David's threatening doom. Abishai again uttered the name of Yahuwah, and David dropped to the earth uninjured. Now both of them ran away swiftly, pursued by Abishai. When the giant And when we shall call upon that name, we shall be saved. David was about to die, fall on the sword. The ineffable name of Yahuwah was pronounced and saved him, stopped him from falling, suspended him in air. What's going on, David? Reverse thy prayer. He pronounced Yahuwah's name again, which decreased the impact he would have had, and David hit the ground without being harmed. They took off running. I just want to say that because it's that name, not all these other names. There's quite a few of them, but they're referring to somebody else. It has no power. We clearly can see that. You can call on it all day long, but it has no power. And when you are saved, it's not because you call on that powerless name. It's because Yahuwah, first of all, knows you ignorant. And a lot of times our people in their heart, they truly believe that they are speaking to the Most Holy. And I believe that is what it gets us those saving grace along the way. Although we kind of recollect it, if you're still doing it, calling on the name of JC, I'm telling you, it's not that. It's not that. And people will fight to the death. Well, I've been calling on this name, and this is no, you've been calling on that name ignorantly, but all your help comes from Yahuwah and Yahuwah alone, right? And a lot of our people are waking up and we're understanding that, and we're putting away those things. We're putting away those names and giving just praise and due honor and adoration to Yahuwah and Yahuwah alone. Look, some of us going to learn. Yahuwah is going to teach us, some of us, that name, right? Because we're going to need it. All right, I'm going to go back up here. The two men joined their prayers and pleaded with Yahuwah to avert David's threatening doom. Abishai again uttered the name of Yahuwah, and David dropped to the earth uninjured. Now both of them ran away swiftly, pursued by Ishbi. When the giant heard of his mother's death, his strength forsook him, and he was slain by David and Abishai. Visitations. Okay, I gotta send it as soon as I get done. Among the sorrows of David are the visitations that came upon Palestine during his reign, and he felt them all the more as he had incurred them through his own fault. There was the first famine, which was so desolating that it is counted among the 10 severest that are to happen from the time of Adam to the time of the Messiah. During the first year that it prevailed, David had an investigation set on foot to discover whether idolatry was practiced in the land and was keeping back the rain. His suspicion proved groundless. The second year, he took into the moral considerations of his realm, for lewdness can bring about the same punishment as idolatry. Again, he was proved wrong. The third year, he turned his attention to the administration of charity, Perhaps the people had incurred guilt in this respect, for abuses in this department also were visited with the punishment of famine. Take note of some of these things, y'all, because remember, different different types of things, or being ignorant of certain types of laws that Yahuwah has set in motion, especially for his people, will bring about certain punishments. And although people may not believe it, it's still true and it's still happening to you. Yeah. That's why David, he running through, okay, this is going on. First point of contact should be you. Consider your own ways. Why is this happening in my house? Okay, I'm clean. Okay, something else has got to be out of whack here. Okay, Is you clean? Is you clean? Is you clean? What did you do? Did you do something? Let's cast lots. We need to figure out why this curse, why this famine is here, right? Okay. But we know this one was because of David alone, right? And Yahuwah told him, he said, look, choose. Perhaps the people had incurred guilt in this respect, for abuses in this department were also visited with the punishment of famine. Again, his search was fruitless, and he turned to Yahuwah to inquire of him the cause of the public distress. Yahuwah's reply was not Saul a king anointed with holy oil? Did he not abolish idolatry? Is he not the companion of Samuel in paradise? Yet while you dwelt in the land of Israel, he is outside of the land. David, accompanied by the scholars of the nobles of his kingdom, at once repaired to Jabesh Gilead, disinterred the remains of Saul and Jonathan, and in solemn procession bore them through the whole land of Israel to the inheritance of the tribe of Benjamin. There they were there they were buried. The tributes of affection paid by the people of Israel to its dead king aroused the compassion of Yahuwah, and the famine came to an end. I remember yesterday, Yahuwah said to him, he said, listen, my servant Saul, you haven't even given him the proper burial of a king. Like, King Saul was pious. He was a good king, right? He just had that one mistake that he did. And that one mistake cost him his life and the life of his sons, right? Look, those that are in higher positions of authority, they are dealt with most swiftly. If y'all had not realized that, right? They're dealt with a lot swifter than the people who are running amok, right? The people that's running amok will be dealt with accordingly as well. But if the king is running amok and disobeying Yahuwah's commands, Yahuwah has to punish him immediately, to whereas the people get a little more grace. Not that they're getting grace, but if you got the king out of whack, the entire nation gonna be out of whack. And that's what happened over and over again. That's why they constantly had their kings killed. Right? Yahuwah said, wrong example. Let's go. Who up next for the kingship? Let's go. You gonna do what he did? Let's see. You get your chance. It's your turn now. Let's go. You know? Some of them just did not learn, which is why we're here, right? The sin against Saul was now absolved, but there still remained Saul's own guilt in his dealings with the Gibeonites, who charged him with having killed 7 of their number. David asked Yahuwah why had he punished his people on the account of proselytes. Yahuwah's answer to him, if thou dost not bring near them that are far off, thou wilt remove them that are nearby. To satisfy their vengeful feelings, the Gibeonites demanded the life of 7 members of Saul's family. David sought to mollify them, representing to them that they would derive no benefit from the death of their victims, and offering them silver and gold instead. But though David treated them each one individually, the Gibeonites were relentless. When he realized their hardness of heart, he cried out, 3 qualities Yahuwah gave unto Israel. They are compassionate, chaste, and gracious in the service of their fellow men. The first of these qualities the Gibeonites do not possess, and therefore they must be excluded from communion with Israel. The 7 descendants of Saul to be surrendered to the Gibeonites were determined by letting all his posterity pass by the ark of the law. Those who were arrested before it were designated victims. Mephibosheth would have been one of the unfortunates had he not been permitted to pass by unchecked in answer to the prayer of David, to whom he was dear. not only as the son of his friend Jonathan, but also as the teacher who instructed him in the Torah. The cruel fate that befell the descendants of Saul had a wholesome effect. All the heathen who saw the herd exclaimed, "There is no God like unto the God of Israel. There is no nation like unto the nation of Israel. The wrong inflicted upon the wretched proselytes has been expiated by the sons of kings." So great was the enthusiasm among the heathen over this manifestation of the Hebrew sense of justice that 150,000 of them were converted to Hebrew. As for David, his wrong in connection with the famine lay in not having applied his private wealth to the amelioration of the people's suffering. When David returned victorious from the combat with Goliath, the women of Israel gave him their gold and silver ornaments. He put them aside for use in the building of the temple, and even during 3 years' famine, this fund was not touched. Yahuwah said, "Thou didst refrain from rescuing human beings from death in order to save thy money for the temple. Verily, the temple shall not be built by thee, but by Solomon." David is still more blameworthy on account of the census which he took of the Israelites in defiance of the law and the Pentateuch. When he was charged by the king with the task of numbering the people, Joab used every effort to turn him away from his intention, but in vain. And since David said, "Either thou art king and I am the general, or I am the king and thou art the general," Joab had no choice but to obey. He selected the tribe of Gad as the first to be counted because he thought that the Gadites, independent and self-willed, would hinder the execution of the royal order, and David would be forced to give up his plan of taking the census. The Gadites disappointed the expectations of Joab, and he betook himself to the tribe of Dan, hoping that if Yahuwah's punishment descended, it would strike the idolatrous Danites. Disliking his mission as he did, Joab spent 9 months in executing it, though he might have dispatched it in a much shorter time. Nor did he carry out the king's orders to the letter. He himself warned the people of the census. If he saw the father of a family have 5 sons, he would bid him to conceal a few of them. Following the example by Moses, he omitted the Levites from the enumeration, likewise the tribe of Benjamin, because he was entertained particularly grave apprehensions in behalf of this greatly decimated tribe. In the end, Dan was not informed of the actual number obtained. Joab made 2 lists, intending to give the king a partial list if he found that he had no suspicion of ruse. The prophet Gad came to David and gave him the choice of famine, oppression by enemies, or the plague as the penalty for the heavy crime of popular census taking. David was in a position of a sick man who was asked whether he prefers to be buried next to his father or next to his mother. The king considered, "If I choose the calamities of war, the people will say, 'He cares little. He has his warriors to look to.' If I choose famine, they will say, 'He cares little. He has his riches to look to.' I shall choose the plague, whose scourges strike all alike." Although the plague raged but a very short time, it claimed a large number of victims. The most serious loss was the death of Abishai, whose piety and learning made him the counterpoise of a host of 75,000. David raised his eyes on high, and he saw the sins of Israel heaped up from heaven to earth. In the same moment, an angel descended and slew his 4 sons, the prophet Gad and the elders who accompanied him. David's terror at this sight, which was but increased when the angel, wiping his dripping sword on the king's garments, settled. Oh my gosh. Look. After the angel slaughtered them, he came to David and wiped his sword on King David's garments. David's terror at this sight, which was but increased when the angel wiped his dripping sword on the king's garments, settled in his limbs, and from that day on, they never cease to tremble. Okay, y'all. We're going to read this next section, then we're going to be, it's short. We might read 2. Okay, we'll get through 2. The death of David. David once sought to tell Yahuwah when David once sought to tell him when he would die. David once besought Yahuwah to tell him when he would die. His petition was not granted, for Yahuwah has ordained that no man shall foreknow his end. One thing, however, was revealed to David, that his death would occur. One thing, however, was revealed to David, that his death would occur at the age of 70 on the Sabbath day. David desired that he might be permitted to die on Friday. This wish, too, was denied him, because Yahuwah said that he delighted more in one day passed by David in the study of Torah than in the... Hold on. This wish, too, was denied him, because Yahuwah said that he delighted more in one day passed by David in the study of Torah than in 1,000 holocausts offered by Solomon in the temple. Then David petitioned that life might be vouchsafed him until Sunday. This, too, was refused, because Yahuwah said it would be an infringement on the rights of Solomon, for one reign may not overlap by a hairbreadth the time assigned to another. And we heard that before. Therefore, thereafter, David spent every Sabbath exclusively in the study of the Torah in order to secure himself against the angel of death, who had no power to slay a man while he is occupied with the fulfillment of Yahuwah's commandments. The angel of death had to resort to cunning to gain possession of David. One Sabbath day, which happened to be also the Pentecost holiday, the king was absorbed in study when he heard a sound in the garden. He rose and descended the stairway leading from his palace to the garden to discover the cause of the noise. No sooner had he set foot on the steps than they tumbled in, and David was killed. The angel of death had caused the noise in order to utilize the moment when David should interrupt his study. The king's corpse could not be moved on the Sabbath, which was painful to those with him, as it was lying exposed to the rays of the sun. So Solomon summoned several eagles, and they stood guard over the body, shading it with their outstretched pinions. So Solomon summoned several eagles, and they stood guard over the body, shading it with their outstretched pinions. David in paradise. The death of David did not mean the end of his glory and grandeur. It merely caused a change of scene. In the heavenly realm, as on earth, David ranks among the first. The crown upon his head outshines all others. And when he moves out of paradise to present himself before Yahuwah, suns, stars, angels, seraphim, and other holy beings run to meet him. In the heavenly courtroom, a throne of fire of gigantic dimensions is erected for him directly opposite to the throne of Yahuwah. Seated on his throne and surrounded by the kings of the house of David and other Hebrew kings, he intones wondrously beautiful songs. At the end, he always cites the verse, Yahuwah reigns forever and ever, to which the archangel Metatron and those with him reply, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. This is the signal for the holy Hayat in heaven and earth to join in with praise. Finally, the kings of David's house sing the verse, and Yahuwah shall be king over all, and in that day Yahuwah shall be one, and his name one. The greatest distinction to be accorded to David is reserved for the judgment day, when Yahuwah will prepare a great banquet in paradise for all the righteous. At David's petition, Yahuwah himself will be present at the banquet and will sit on his throne. Opposite to which David's throne will be placed. At the end of the banquet, Yahuwah will pass the wine cup over which grace is said to Abraham with the words, pronounce the blessing over the wine, thou who art the father of the pious world. Abraham will reply, I am not worthy to pronounce the blessing, for I am the father also of the Ishmaelites who kindled Yahuwah's wrath. Yahuwah would then turn to Isaac, say the blessing, for thou wert bound upon the altar as a sacrifice. I am not worthy, he will reply. For the children of my son Esau destroyed the temple. Then to Jacob, do thou speak the blessing, thou whose children were blameless? Jacob will also decline the honor on the ground that he was married to two sisters at the same time, which later was strictly prohibited by the Torah. Yahuwah will then turn to Moses, say the blessing, for thou didst receive the law and did fulfill its precepts. Moses will answer, I am not worthy to do it, seeing that I was not found worthy to enter the Holy Land. Yahuwah will next offer the honor to Joshua, who both led Israel into the Holy Land and fulfilled the commandments of the law. He too will refuse to pronounce the blessing because he was not found worthy to bring forth a son. Finally, Yahuwah will turn to David with the words, take the cup and say the blessing, thou, the sweetest singer in Israel and Israel's king. David will reply, yes, I will pronounce the blessing, for I am worthy of the honor. Then Yahuwah will take the Torah and read the various passages from it, and David will recite a psalm in which both the pious in paradise and all the wicked in hell will join with a loud amen. Thereupon Yahuwah will send his angels to lead the wicked from hell to paradise. And we will pause there. Let that sink down in your shana now. All right, y'all. That was Legends of the Jews. We started on page 417. Now we pause right here on page 420. And we will pick up the rest of this, starting with the family of David tomorrow. And we'll read about his tomb. We read Judges 19, 20, and 21. It is March the 17th, 2021, Wednesday, day 104. Of year 3 of reading through the books of the law and the prophets and of the 3-year consecutive day count, day 773. And that is without the Sabbath days, nor the feast day, Sabbath days added into the count. All right, beautiful people. So let's go ahead over here and do the blessing, which is found in Numbers chapter 6, verses 22 through 27. Remember, the Nazarite vow is the first 21 verses, right? Okay. And Yahuwah spake unto Moses, saying, speak unto Aaron and unto his sons, saying, on this wise ye shall bless the children of Israel, saying unto them, may Yahuwah bless us and keep us. May Yahuwah make his face to shine upon us and be gracious unto us. May Yahuwah lift up his countenance upon us and give us peace. And they shall put my name upon the children of Israel, and I will bless them. Okay, beautiful people, remember, we are preparing for Passover and Feast of Unleavened Bread. So check through your house. Make sure you get all the leaven and yeast products and byproducts out of your homes. All right, y'all. It's a remembrance feast, a memorial feast, and we're to do it to keep Yahuwah's commands and what he has done for us fresh in the forefront of our memories. Right here, right there. So we always remember, we never forget, and we continue to walk uprightly while we walk this earth. All right, beautiful people. Gotta go. Gotta get work done. All right, so love y'all. I see y'all here same time tomorrow morning, 7:15 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. I didn't see any questions. I already scanned real quick with my eyes. All right, y'all. Love y'all. See y'all in the morning. Peace.